Hello and welcome. I hope you're enjoying the Outlier conference so far. I know I am. I'd like to thank the organisers for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you all today. My name is Sarah Bartlett. I'm a data visualization consultant and I'm the founder of a project called IronQuest, which runs within the Tableau community. Today I'd like to share with you some lessons that I've learned from running IronQuest and hopefully you can apply them in your own work. Before I tell you what IronQuest is all about, I'd like to ask you a question. When was the last time that you took a chance? This could be something as simple as trying a new recipe perhaps, or maybe even you've taken up a new hobby during the pandemic. Both of these are quite low risk kind of chance taking, but taking a risk can sometimes mean something traditionally scary or anxiety inducing, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Taking chances can actually expose you to positive outcomes that we never would have experienced before and can help to boost your confidence too. So perhaps when you're trying that new recipe, you may discover that you've actually got a real skill for something. Back in 2018, I took a chance and I entered the Tableau Iron Viz competition. For those of you that don't know, Tableau run a data visualization contest every year called Iron Viz. It's formed of two parts. The first part is a feeder competition where Tableau set a topic and asks you to go away, find data and visualize that topic. And for the people that proceed to the final, you're asked to build a visualization live on stage in 20 minutes in front of an audience of anywhere between 4,000 or 8,000 people. Now, when I entered the Iron Viz feeder competition for Europe, I did that because I had some time on my hands. I was trying to improve my data visualization skills, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to practice and learn. The theme that year was European cities, and I did a visualization on the cheapest European cities you can visit on a budget. I entered my viz, I thought nothing more of it, but to my surprise and horror, I made it through to the final. Now, I didn't win the competition, but I had an amazing experience and I was really keen that other people were able to experience it too. Just taking part in the competition, aside from taking part in the final, was a lot of fun. I made new connections and new friends along the way. And I really wanted other people to have that opportunity. But when I observed people later that year taking part in the global competition, I heard some people holding themselves back and not taking part. They felt like they were saying things like they weren't good enough, or they'd had some imposter syndrome, or they thought, well, I'm not going to win, so what's the point of even entering? And that was really disheartening for me because I really wanted people to have that opportunity. So I kind of thought about this for a while and thought, what is it that I could do to maximize people's chances of actually entering, let alone winning? And through thinking this through, I decided to actually take a chance and launch my own data visualization project to run within the Tableau community, which will actually improve people's chances of success in Iron Viz. And that project is called IronQuest. Now, IronQuest follows the same format as the Tableau Iron Viz feeder competitions. Every month or so, I'll set a topic for people to go away and visualize, and they have to do everything from finding data related to that topic and building a visualization as well. The topics are kept purposely broad so people can shape them how they wish. Examples of topics we've run in the past are food and drink, and quantified self. We've actually done some that are designed around design features such as designing in black and white, using maps, and designing for mobile. Some of the more design-focused ones actually are designed to push people out of their comfort zones and try something new that they wouldn't have tried before. Now, the project started at the beginning of 2019, and to date we've run 13 challenges. We've received over 480 entries across 246 participants. And I'm really excited to say that 28 of those entries have been recognized by Tableau as the Viz of the Day. So every day Tableau pick a visualization to feature, and 28 of those have been IronQuest entries. The pictures you see on the screen now are entries from our quantified self round that ran around May and June in 2020. Now, running this project, I've learned a couple of things, and I've also learned things from my own experience from taking part in Iron Viz. When embarking on any new data visualization project, there are a number of decisions that you need to make and hurdles that you need to overcome along the way. Quite often I see these as things that potentially could stop you in your tracks and prevent you from going any further. Now, I want to talk you through some of these lessons today and show examples of how people have actually overcome them and set themselves up for success by overcoming these lessons in IronQuest. All of the examples I'm going to show you were built using Tableau, but these lessons apply regardless of what tool that you're using. So let's get stuck in. So the first lesson is the biggest one, I expect. So when you're undertaking any data visualization project, particularly personal projects where you have full autonomy over what you do, the question that you need to answer first is, what should I visualize? And it's a big one because you could visualize absolutely anything. And this is one that I ponder all the time. You know, I get stuck because I spend so long at this stage trying to decide something that I should visualize. And I think this is where IronQuest can help hold people accountable, because it gives them a topic every month to actually go away and work on, and it kind of takes the thought process away. If you are experiencing this problem and you just can't pick a topic to visualize, I would suggest that you try and focus on something that you love. It's so much easier and much more fun if you visualize a topic that you actually enjoy. I know in the past I've tried to visualize topics that I'm not particularly passionate about, and it's been a real struggle because not only have I got to do the research on that topic before I can even understand the data, it's also just not a fun process. But when you visualize something that you love, perhaps your favorite band or your favorite TV show, it can be so much more fun, and you'll enjoy it more, and it's a great way to learn as well. I have some examples here to show you from actual IronQuest submissions. So the first one here is by Mark Corbridge. So this was entered as part of our Passion Projects round, which ran in January 2020. And the Passion Projects round was designed to do exactly this: help people to visualize things that they love. And Mark loves Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So Mark decided to look at the data from Buffy. He managed to find some data online, and he also collected some data himself by watching the series. And he decided to have a look at the number of baddies that and just deaths in general in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series. So you can see here he categorizes the different characters into the type of creature that they are, and if they're good or bad, and then counts the number of deaths by category. I mean, I've watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I'm by no means an expert in it. But the way that Mark has presented this visualization actually makes it really easy to understand, even for people who have never seen the show before. And his passion for the topic really shines through. I think that's something really special. Another example I have here is by Michelle Freeman. So Michelle Freeman entered this visualization for the MAPS round, which was in March 2020. And for that round, we asked people to go away and build a visualization that contained a map. Now, this pushed a lot of people outside of their comfort zones because people don't necessarily use maps in their work, especially not in their day job, perhaps, where they may not have any geographic data. So Michelle decided to visualize data about ski resorts in New England in the US. So Michelle is an avid skier. So she took some data that based on things that she knew about skiing in New England. So first of all, she mapped out where all the resorts are. She looked at the resorts that have the most ski lifts. She then looked at the average ticket price per resort per state. And then she also had a look at the actual resorts that she'd visited. So she marked those on the map, and she counted the number of mountains where she'd skied. She looked at the elevation range for the mountains in each state. And she also looked outside of New England to see the other places she could potentially go skiing in future. Now, I really love this visualization because, again, Michelle's love of skiing really comes through in this. She's made it personal, but at the same time, it's useful for other people should they be wishing to ski in New England. So again, I believe that if Michelle wasn't an avid skier, she wouldn't have had so much fun building this visualization. Okay, so the next lesson I want to talk about is about finding data. So often I hear people say, help, I can't find any data. And again, this is a blocker because if you can't find the data, you can't really proceed past go. And this is something that I've experienced myself. It's something I actually experienced when I was putting together my Iron Viz feeder viz on European cities. I spent literally weeks Googling, trying to find that magical data set that would contain all the data that I needed in the right format. And I've come to believe over the years the magic data set simply doesn't exist. Most of the data sets out there, if not all of them, will have been created for a specific purpose. And it's unlikely that that purpose is going to match your purpose when you're visualizing the data. you're probably going to take things to a different angle, or it's just not going to meet your needs. So my suggestion here would be, if you get stuck, try building your own data sets. So by that, I mean, you could source data sets from multiple different sources and put them together and shape them and kind of make them your own. Or better still, you could actually collect your own data. So where we've seen with Mark, he actually collected some data by watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and recording that data down himself. Or perhaps you could actually record some data on yourself and do something more along the lines of a quantified self project, which a lot of people have done for Iron Viz over the years, Iron Quest, sorry. I have an example here of just that by Adam Green. So Adam Green entered this visualization as part of our black and white round back towards the end of 2020. So in this visualization, Mark collected data on all of the visualizations, or the last 100 visualizations he'd published to Tableau Public. And he looked at the background color of each of his visualizations and categorized it to show whether it was either black, white, or another color. He then visualized this data in this kind of like hex kind of map style pattern. And what I really love about this is it really shows his color choices over time. You can see he went through phases of designing white backgrounds and then multicolored or different colored backgrounds, but then it always reverts back to white or black along the way as well. I just really love the way that Adam presented this data, and what makes it special is it's all data about him. It's not data that he would have found online anywhere. Another example of a quantified self-viz I've got here is by Judith Becker. So at the beginning of 2020, Judith started recording her spending habits, and she was categorizing her spending into 3 buckets, either bills, necessities, or spending on herself. And what's really interesting is you can see her spending habits change as the pandemic hit and she was under quarantine. So at the beginning in February, before the quarantine hit, you could see she was spending a lot of money on necessities and bills and just on herself in general. And then if you compare that to April, you can see how her spending changed quite dramatically and she was saving a lot more money. So I thought this was really interesting. I mean, we could all do this. It's not exposing any personal details. We see nowhere, actual values of money, but it's a really interesting way of showing how the quarantine and the pandemic actually hit her personally and her finances specifically. And again, this is data that's not available online. It's data that she's actually collected herself. Okay, so the third lesson is something that, again, most of us experiences, we might struggle with storytelling. So we may have got our data, we may have got our topic, and then when we're trying to pull it all together, it can be quite difficult to understand how to structure a viz, what you should include, what you shouldn't include. And so I would say that it's really important that you understand your why. To understand why you're doing this, what is your objective, what do you want people to get out of your visualization? Your objective could be either exploratory or declarative. So if we start with the left-hand side, exploratory, it could be that you're sharing a finding. So perhaps you've got some data, you've explored it and you want to share what you learned. Or perhaps you want to satisfy a curiosity. Or perhaps it's more on the right-hand side. So perhaps you're trying to be more declarative in the sense that you're trying to educate people or tell people about something or convince them of a certain topic. I have some examples here that I'd love to share with you. So the first one is by Gary Collins. So in this visualization, Gary looked at a big data set related to UFO sightings in the US. Now, when he was exploring the data, he found a really interesting outlier, no pun intended, related to a date back in 2015 where there was a spike in UFO sightings on the west coast of the US. Now, by digging into the data and actually by doing some research, he found that in fact, it wasn't actual UFO sightings that people saw. There was actually a green flash which occurred due to an unarmed missile that was released from a submarine in Southern California. And as a result of this, many people reported the incident to the police, hence why there was a spike in UFO sightings. But what I found really interesting about this visualization was Gary explored his curiosity. He took that big data set and then he really delved into the detail and then presented his findings back to his audience. Another example I have here is by T-ho. So in this example, T is a complete contrast to Gary's viz. So T's is much more focusing on the declarative side. So T starts off by presenting data on the global rice industry, including which countries and regions produce the most rice. She then goes on to talk about she goes into focus on a subset of the data, specifically in Vietnam and specifically in a region called the Mekong Delta. The Mekong Delta produces around 3% of the world's rice, but unfortunately has been subject to periods of drought due to dams positioned further upstream of the Mekong River. T uses her viz as an opportunity to educate readers about the problems faced by the people of the Mekong Delta who rely on the rice industry to provide for their families. She also provides a link for which people can follow so they can find out more information about the issue and to sign a petition to help protect the area. So as I said, in contrast, this one is much more declarative, where she's telling us about a problem and encouraging us to go out and find out more information about it and make a difference. My final lesson today is a slightly different one, and is quite often it's an assumption that most of us make, is that we think everyone's going to understand our work, and it can be very easily done. You know, you think, well, I know everything about this, so surely everyone else does. Or perhaps you've built something that's quite complex to understand, but because you've built it, you think it's easy. But sometimes people need a little bit of guidance. So I'd say always include context. And context could be both setting the scene in terms of like your storytelling, but also context in terms of how to read your work. I have a great example here by Lindsay Betzendahl. And this one was entered as part of our healthcare and prisons round, which we ran in January 2020. So in this viz, Lindsay explores some data relating to pregnancy in prison. So rather than just showing the data on the topic at a macro level, Lindsay distilled the data down to a single data point, which represented a woman who arrived in prison in Australia during the late stages of her pregnancy. She then brought her story to life. Sadly, her story is not unique. So then Lindsay used data from the US to show what the experience might be like for similar women who are pregnant in prison in the US. What I really love about this visualization is that Lindsay used that story to set the scene and to show that, to really bring that story to life and show the experience of what individual women may be going through if they are pregnant in prison. And she actually has a whole section called context, because that context is so important here. And in stark contrast to that, it's a completely different visualization. This time it's one on football by Chris Curtis. So Chris is a supporter of Fulham Football Club, a British English Premier League football club. And last year they made it to the Europa Cup finals. And what Chris does in this visualization is he presents the data about the games leading up to the competition final. So each game in the competition is represented by a large circle showing if Fulham were either the home or away team. The inner circle then represents the result of the game, and while the lines coming out of those circles represents the games themselves, with the position of the circles along the line representing the timing of any goals, and the color of those circles representing the teams that scored them. What I really love about this visualization is he really brings the data to life. You really get a sense of what those games might have been like. You know, were they eventful? Were they with lots of goals, or were they quite uneventful, or were there goals scored at the last minute or in extra time? So it's really interesting. But without that context, and you notice the how to read section on the top right, without that context, it would be very difficult to understand what this visualization is all about and how to read it. So it's really important that Chris has set the scene, provided some context and background, and some instructions on how to read. Hopefully you've been inspired by some of the lessons that I've shared today. If you want to find out more about the IronQuest project, you can find all the details on my website, sarahlovesdata.co.uk, or you could also search the hashtag IronQuest across all major social media platforms. Before I go today, I want to leave you with a quote. The quote is, "Take a chance, you never know what might happen." Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the Outlier conference. It's been a pleasure talking with you.